Hey guys, this is Sim with the Hard Time Strongman, showing up at Bear Class of Man, and today I'm joined by special guest Jake from Civil Sentinel. Jake, how are you doing, man?
I'm great. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm so excited to have you on. So glad to have you here. We've talked for months now. You've helped us on the page with some combo stuff, MCon, TACOM, and I know that you're really active in this in this sect of the community. You just started your own podcast. You're on Instagram. Um, I think you were combo. You said back in the day you're still doing combo. I know that you're still running classes, but we try to get as many subject matter experts on the show as we can to try to raise that standard, um, and make everybody better just in a more holistic approach. So like I said, super excited to have you on. Do you want to just kind of share your background, what you do, and where you're going?
Absolutely. Um, Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I reached out to you guys. It's been a few months now, and asked you guys to talk about some calm stuff, and you guys did that on the podcast. So I'm glad to finally get to join you and have a discussion. Um,
Yeah, me too, man.
so a little bit about my background. I am not former military. I'm not law enforcement. Um, I am involved in the community, so to speak. I started training, doing tactics, and it really started with three-gun competitions and kind of ended up into small unit tactics through a militia unit back in 2014 in
Okay.
Central Texas. And that kind of phased out. The militia route didn't really seem to be something that I wanted to stick with long term. And I know a lot of people that train guns and tactics. If they go that route, they don't stick with it.
Right.
There's It's kind of a political hotbed for better or worse.
Yeah,
So
a lot of stigma.
a lot of stigma. Yeah, people don't like the word militia either. Although technically we all are a militiaman
Yeah.
according to the Constitution. Um,
Well, I think that should be, part of the goal, right? I mean, the whole idea of the militia, being well regulated, being well trained, well equipped. That's all what we're trying to do, anyways. It's just it's gotten such an ugly face, both politically and just socially for years that it's really hard to to change the culture in that way to make that more acceptable.
yeah, it's really unfortunate that it's that way, but militia and the Minutemen movement, that's such a huge part of American history, and it
Oh yeah.
predates policing. Back in the day, there's tons of books and history references you can refer to. And back in the day, there was no police. If there was a problem in the community leaders would go to the militias to deal with it. And the militias were made up of farmers and businessmen and people of the community. And
Right.
our society has evolved or devolved, however you want to look at it, to the point where we are now. And unfortunately, that militia mentality, that militia word is a bad word, is a dirty word, is a politicized word. And
Yeah.
really, at the end of the day, it's all about uh, gaining and acquiring skill sets that are good for survival and for the community and for the betterment of your family. And that's what it should be all about.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And we've since we started, the focus has always been on individual, family, neighbors, your greater community, being able to serve people. So it is sad about seeing that cultural change over generations to generations, because that responsibility of protection, of provision, that doesn't go away. If you shun that, then someone else has to pick that up, and a lot of the time it's once someone else picks it up, they're not giving it back. That's kind of gone forever, the opportunity. So trying to get people you know fired up and just passionate about this, about taking care of themselves, taking care of their families and their communities. It's a difficult task, and it's made more difficult when there's infighting, when there's conflict in the community that's trying to push everybody forward. So it's a big task, but I like what you said about taking a more holistic approach, right? Gaining a lot of skill sets and doing that to better serve your community. That's really great.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when I joined, like I said, I kind of started through a fascination with three gun competitions, and I wanted to learn some more um, tactical type stuff, and that's how I found my way in. And so um, they do the militia that I joined used comms, and everybody had a Baofeng UV5R, uh, and that's still a kind of a standard radio for anybody getting into small unit tactics. But
Naturally, right?
when I got in, nobody knew how to use them. They had frequencies they manually punched in, and the radios were all still in Chinese, and it was
Goodness.
a noisy mess. And they made it work, but I took it upon myself to figure out how do these things work, how do we get them programmed, and how can I use this to better the militia unit. And so naturally, uh, kind of as a mistake, I fell down the rabbit hole and became the commo. And um, as the years have gone by, it grew to be a passion.
Yeah, trap man.
It's a trap. I feel like a lot of the gun industry is that way too, though.
That is, building guns, buying guns, combo, gear, everything.
Yeah, Gucci
But
Glocks.
Gucci Gucci Glocks. But good for you, man. Like just, taking that upon yourself, seeing the deficiency in your, in your community and like I said, taking upon yourself to fix that. That's really awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially with something as messy as combo, man. You're nuts.
I have
So,
I had a little bit of a baseline to kind of help me along the way. So, growing up, my father was a ham radio guy, and
okay.
when he was in high school, back in the '70s, his first job was installing ham radios in trucks. And
Oh, wow. Okay.
so I grew up around my father being a ham radio guy, and he hasn't been into it in decades. Uh, but so I had kind of a baseline there, something to reference. I knew what ham radio was, and a Baofeng is a ham radio.
Right.
Um, and then uh, naturally, my father's progression, he started a small internet company that served rural areas back when there was dial-up and DSL, and that was it. Late '90s, early 2000s. So what
Wow.
what they did is they used these 2.4 um, panel antennas, and they'd go out and drop a T1 at a water tower site in rural areas that couldn't get DSL, and we'd go to people's homes and uh, put a 2.4 antenna on their roof and point it at the water tower, run a coax or a Cat5 down to their router, configure their router, and they had internet over radio. And
Wow.
so
That's crazy.
and that's still a tactic used today. That's a lot how the mesh-tastic networks work to some degree, not absolutely, but it's just IP traffic over radio is all it is. Um, so
That's all it is.
that gave me
That's magic.
it is magic. uh, Doing all that stuff that gave me a reference, and all that knowledge and experience helped me fall into my groove where I am today. Um, Otherwise, I'd probably be lost. Um,
Yeah.
so it definitely gave me a starting point that I didn't know that I needed, or a springboard into something I didn't know that I would fall into in the future.
Yeah, that's really great, man. Especially like like you said, having family, having a having that history of your dad who was in that space, and then being in a community who obviously need your help. That um, that really ties up everything in like as you were growing up, and then kind of seeing what need to be done, what things could be. So that's really cool that you were able to tie that together and like you said, carve out a passion out of it. So that's really cool. But
Absolutely.
I guess before we well, we kind of went into what you're doing now. Do you want to just flesh out a little bit?
Yeah. So I run a Instagram page called Civil Sentinel, and I started it. Um, I started Civil Sentinel to make comms a little bit more easy to understand, a little bit more easy to swallow. So when I started learning this stuff, I felt my way through it, and I didn't really have uh, many people who could teach me the fundamentals of radio science and how radio
Okay.
works and the why behind it. And
Right.
there's some critical components that you need to understand, like modulation, antenna theory, the different frequency bands, simplex and duplex, um, and that's very foundational in making your comms work and troubleshooting comms.
Right.
And anybody who's gotten into the ham radio community has probably felt a little bit of the frustration that I felt. I know we talk about it on the Civil Sentinel podcast, but there's a lot of people that get into ham radio and they're just so frustrated by it. And a lot of that has to do with the technical depth of the knowledge that you're learning. And it's kind of one of those things, you have to build a framework to plug this information into for it to make sense. If you just hit someone with, well, this is how you program a duplex repeater, they're going to be like, I have no idea what you just told me.
Right.
But if you can kind of, build a foundation and then build a framework of how radio works and the what and the why, then when you start to explain some of these things, it has a place to call home in their brain and make sense. And I've attempted to try to do that through the Instagram page. Take some of these basic concepts and make them a little bit more easy to swallow than going to QRZ or ARRL or some of the ham radio YouTube pages out there. Um, I'm trying to simplify it as best as I can, and I've gotten some feedback. People have told me, "Thank you for doing what you're doing. It made sense when you said it like that." So I think I'm doing a good job. Uh, I hope I'm doing a good job, and it's a hot topic. Comms are popular right now; they're growing in popularity. So
Which is really great. Something that's generally been pretty pretty hands off, pretty neglected in the community. So that's really awesome, and I am really appreciative of you, uh, starting from that bare bones approach, uh, trying to flesh out those some big concepts because it is a very difficult concept to grasp. I like what the word you said earlier, radio communication, like science. I think is what you said. Because there is a science to all of it. I mean, it is just such a vast subject. So we're going to try to break down a little bit of that subject today. Um, but naturally for the framing of this conversation, we're going to unfortunately limit the scope quite a lot. I'm thinking more just straight entry level analog radios, like a Baofeng, like someone would pick up from Amazon or from a hardware store for $20 and go out with their buddies and try to hash it out, figure out how to use it.
absolutely. Where would
All
you like to
right.
start?
So, I have a lot of just general like foundational questions, but I guess a good place to start just for framing purposes. What would you consider MCOM and TACCOM, emergency communication and tactical communication?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, from a good starting point would be emergency communications, EMCOM. Um, Emergency communications. Let's take a step back and talk about the different platforms of radio that exist out there to the public.
Okay.
So everybody's heard of CB radio. A lot of the off-road trucks you see driving around, Jeeps, uh, overlanding guys, they get CB radios.
Okay.
You'll be
That
able to
stands for
recognize
civilian
it.
band, right?
Yes, civilian band.
Okay.
And you'll recognize CB radio because you'll see a big 6 foot antenna on the back of somebody's truck or their Jeep or something like that. It's a big long whip antenna.
Okay.
Um, civilian band is available to the public, license free. You can get CB radios at any truck stop in America. Um, and then from there, you got FRS radio. FRS stands for Family Radio Service. So if you go to Cabela's or Bass Pro Shops or Academy Sports or Dick's Sporting Goods or Walmart, you can get those little radios that has, 1 through 24 channels on it, and it has, just a little blister pack radio is what they're being called. You can buy a 4 pack of them, you can buy a 6 pack of them, or you can buy them individually. Um, they're basically, for all intents and purposes, just a low power uh, family use radio is kind of how the FCC chose to describe it.
Okay.
And that's another radio that exists in the public domain, license free. And kind of taking another layer back from there. Um, this is also public, available to the public, but MURS radio, MURS, and it's a different band. So CB is one band. CB is in the 11-meter band. I won't get into the weeds too much on this, I promise.
Oh, you're fine.
FRS is in the UHF band, and then there's MURS radio, multi-use radio service, I believe it's called. Um, there's 4 frequencies in the MURS frequency block that are available for public use without a license. Um, and then you got getting into your licensed radio, you have GMRS, General Mobile Radio Service, I believe is what it's called. And GMRS is about a $70 license. You don't have to take a test, but there are some rules that you have to follow. So you go online, you read the thing, you sign the form, you pay the $70, boom, you got a license in your email. So what you're going to get with that is there's different channels, CBs, FRS, MURS. They have designated frequencies that are assigned channel numbers. So when you get into like the off-road community, the hiking community, the backpacking, camping, climbing, you're going to see a lot of these radios out there. And so where this applies to MCOM is there's different channels that are going to be used for emergency purposes that are kind of designated, not officially, very unofficially, for emergency use. Okay, so FRS channel 20 is I should say that FRS overlaps with GMRS quite a bit. So FRS
Okay.
channel 20 is also GMRS channel 20. The frequency is 462.675. That is the national emergency frequency. If you have an emergency, you can hop on there and call out. Hope somebody's listening. For MERS, the emergency channel is 151.940, and then CB is channel 9, which is 27.065 megahertz. So kind of where MCOM plays out is these are going to be frequencies that you're going to want to have memorized or laminated on a card or something. So if you have an emergency and you're in the wilderness, you're hunting, you're backpacking, you're camping, you can have a comms plan with people, hop on these frequencies and call out, say, hey, I have an emergency. And that's kind of a good intro into what MCOM is about and where it starts. But it even goes deeper from there when you get into the ham radio world. And to keep it simple, let's not get too much into there. Once you get into ham, you do need a license to operate it.
Okay.
However, in the event of an emergency, you can hop on any ham radio frequency and call for help. And if it's a true emergency, you're not going to be violating any FCC rules. They have mercy on you for that sort of thing.
Okay.
Same with there's a National Guard VHF frequency that exists out there. Never heard of anybody using it. I don't even know if the National Guard monitors it, but it does exist. So another component of MCOM is some of the weather stuff that exists out there. So NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, they have these 7 frequencies that exist on repeaters throughout the North American continent, and they're constantly transmitting weather information. So recently here in Texas, we just got done going through a winter storm, and we were iced over for several days. And
Right.
you can hop on there and listen to weather forecasts, which is a great thing if you're out in the wilderness and you need to know what's coming. It's a good place to start.
Yeah, that is really great. Is that like the channels that are on like have you ever seen like the emergency radios, like the little like solar repower or solar chargeable pulley chargeable um just general emergency radios you can buy at like Walmart or something.
Yeah,
They have
so
the button where it sets you over to like a weather channel. Is this that sort of thing?
yes, so the NOAA channels will be programmed onto those survival radios that you can buy. Um, Along with, that's a good question, man. I haven't dug into that a whole lot. I've actually never owned one.
Oh, no worries. It's just it made me think of that because you have, like you said, the survival radios where you go, like, it has a specific button where you hit that, then it goes right to weather, um, just built in. But it sounds like that, just the like you said, 24/7 weather information.
Yep, it's there. The NOAA channels are on the emergency radios you can buy, and so if you own one of those or you own a Baofeng, you can program those frequencies in and always have access to weather information wherever you are.
Awesome, very cool.
And then another cool component, and this is getting into the ham community. By the way, anybody can go listen to ham radio. You don't have a license. You don't need a license to listen. You can tune in at any time and listen as long as you don't interfere with communications. But there's going to be ham radio repeaters scattered across the entire North American continent and really every rural area and urban area. Um, and there's when there's hazardous weather like tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, fires, floods, uh, there's an emergency radio service called RACES, RACES, and I forget what the acronym stands for, but it's kind of synonymous with another emergency radio service called Skywarn. And what they do is they take over the amateur radio repeaters and have live, updated information on real time weather events that are happening. So you can
Oh
track
wow,
tornadoes. You can they'll be transmitting where floods are happening, where fires are moving, um, all that stuff in real time. Um, and
that's crazy.
that is how the National Weather Service gets their information that they relay to the news stations. And when the news stations talk about, hey, the tornado's crossing this highway and it's going this direction, by the time the news stations air that information out, it's been like 3 to 5 minutes. So getting that stuff on a ham radio, Races or Skywarn, you're getting real time information.
That's awesome. Are those guys all um, like they don't get paid for it? They're just volunteers, right?
100% volunteers, ham
That's
radio
amazing.
guys that love what they do.
That's amazing. That's so cool. So that's MCOM. What's TACCOM?
TACCOM. TACCOM is tactical communications. Um, this is a little bit of a slippery slope. Um, Kind of going back to what you guys mentioned on the podcast um, after I sent you some notes on. So, in a tactical situation, you're going to use radio to coordinate movement, uh, relay status, um, and you're going to want to do that exclusively. Um, so, TACCOM, you're getting into how do I keep closed communications with people that I need to talk to coordinate. Uh,
Okay.
and you're going to be coordinating status. Uh, you're gonna,
Location.
yeah, status, location. Um, in some situations, if you're going out on patrol, you're going to have comm windows. So you'll get on and you'll check in. Hey, I'm still here. I'm at this rally point, or I've crossed this phase line, or I'm in this valley, I'm on this hilltop, or I'm on this highway, whatever. And then you'll log off and you'll check in again. Um, so as far as tactical communications goes, you want to keep that stuff exclusive. You want your people to hear you and nobody else. So TACCOM is where you're going to get into encryption and secure radio. You're going to use brevity code, pro words. You're going to use phonetic alphabet so you're speaking clearly. You're going to use
Emission control.
exactly emissions control, and emissions control applies to radio as well. You only want to use the correct amount of power to reach your intended destination, and no more power than that. But
Right.
there's a lot more nuances to TACCOM than there is MCOM because it's a more of a disciplined uh, skill set.
So what is simplex simplex operation. People hear simplex, duplex. What are those? What do those terms mean?
So simplex is a fancy way of saying end-to-end communication. So if you have a radio and I have a radio and we're going to be talking together, it's simplex. It's simple communications. So think simple, simplex.
Okay, so
Uh,
like walkie talkies.
exactly. Versus duplex. Duplex is it kind of turns radio into a two-way street. So think about it like this: if you and I and a third party are on one frequency and we're trying to talk all at the same time, that frequency is going to get locked up, and uh, you're going to hear just a jumbled mess. Um, so what duplex does is it creates an uplink frequency and a downlink frequency. So think about splitting a two-lane road or a single lane road into two lanes. You have one lane going one direction and the other lane going the other direction. Well, they just do that with frequencies. They have one frequency for talking one way and the other frequency for talking the other way. And this is how repeaters work. It keeps it keeps the traffic from it keeps the traffic manageable. Um, and there's some programming involved to be able to use duplex. You're not ever going to use duplex from radio to radio. Pretty much, you're always going to use simplex. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned repeaters for duplex operation. So what does a repeater do?
A repeater is it takes your signal and it retransmits it at a higher power from a higher location, typically. So radios operate off of a line of sight technology. There are some bands that are capable of how do I say this? There are some bands that radio signal can penetrate trees and buildings well, and then there are some bands that cannot penetrate trees and buildings well at all. So
Okay.
if you obstruct line of sight, you obstruct your radio signal. So what a repeater does is it elevates itself, its antenna, above trees, mountains, buildings, and all that stuff. So it's improving the line of sight characteristics and making your signal path less obstructed. And therefore, you're extending range. And repeaters often they have a very efficient receiving antenna, and they're capable of receiving weaker signals, such as handhelds, which are on like 5 watts. And then they'll retransmit that signal that's received in real time on like 50 watts or 100 watts or 200 watts.
That's amazing.
And so a repeater can, if you can hit the repeater can retransmit, throw your signal out, 50 miles in some cases.
Wow, that's impressive. So you were talking about bands a second ago. I think I've got this right. So UHF, VHF, ultra high frequency, and very high frequency. Do you want to get into those a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So most radios that you're going to get are going to be VHF, UHF radios. The Baofeng is a dual band radio. It's UHF, VHF. And kind of where that came from, ultra high frequency is a higher frequency than very high frequency. Very high frequency is a lower frequency than ultra high frequency. And then there's high frequency, which is lower than very high frequency. So it's a little bit jumbled up. It's a little bit hard to understand, but where that came from, back when they were developing radios, 1930s, Nikola Tesla era, they thought HF was about as high as you could go. That's why they called it HF. And then they realized you can go higher than HF. And so VHF was born. And then they realized you can go higher than VHF. So ultra high frequency was born. And then
Constantly evolving.
Constantly evolving. So VHF and UHF, that's where you're going to camp out and learn radio. They have each one of those bands behaves a little bit differently because of the frequency. UHF being a higher frequency is a smaller wave. VHF is going to be a little bit bigger wave. Um, so, kind of a good rule of thumb is the smaller the wave, you're going to have more bandwidth and you're going to have less distance, um, and you're going to have a little bit less interference. The lower the frequency, you're going to be able to talk further, but you're going to have a whole lot more interference. Um,
Okay.
so that's kind of a, according to antenna theory and the signal science, that's kind of the rule. However, you'll realize if you get out there and test the bands yourself, grab a buddy, go grab some radios, get out there and do some propagation tests, some range tests, test your area that you're in, see how far you can get, play with the power settings. You'll realize that that science doesn't really appear to be absolute. Um, but on paper, radio working in a vacuum, uh, that's the rule to follow.
Okay. So when would you use something like ultra high frequency or very high frequency?
I like to think of ultra high frequency as kind of the go-to band if you're going to be like in a suburban area. Uh, you're going to be around houses, buildings, concrete and glass. You're going to have a lot better success your signal making it to its destination on UHF than on VHF.
Okay.
VHF, if you're going to be in like a rural area or mountains or somewhere that doesn't have a lot of dense trees, prairies and plains or desert, VHF VHF is going to be a lot more efficient. You can really reach out there and get a better signal with VHF. Um,
Okay.
and on the inverse of that, using VHF in a urban setting, um, you're going to have a lot more interruptions in signal because your line of sight isn't as good. Um, your noise, the noise floor is going to interfere with the radio signal a lot more. Um, so, kind of a good rule that I teach when we kind of do some of our trainings is if you're going to be if you're going to be in your neighborhood or if you're going to be in a downtown or somewhere, go to UHF. I'm sorry, you go to UHF. If you're going to be out in the pasture working on the farm or operating in a rural area, go to VHF.
Okay, that makes sense.
Hey everybody, this is 6 and 7 with the Hard Time Strongman podcast, and we are coming to talk to you about our Patreon and Discord.
Hey guys, our patrons get early access to all of our episodes. They get all of our exclusive pre and post shows, all of our spicy takes, all of our rabbit holes that we go on, everything that we want to include in an episode, but we can't because we need to stay on topic. And soon enough, we will be offering digital downloads, guides, everything that we've been working on in the background will soon be available to our patrons. So make sure to check it out.
And come hang out with us on Discord. Speaking of the spicy stuff, this is where we discuss most of it. Once you're there, you'll get access to all of our in-depth discussions, including stuff like homesteading, fieldcraft, medical, camping, communications, shooting. You like ARs? Come talk to us about it. You like 4x4 vehicles and prepping? Come talk to us about it.
You like tannerite, thermite, napalm? Come talk to us about it. All of the campfire talks that would get us kicked off of other platforms. It's right there in our Discord. Come join our community.
We're active on Discord every day. We're interacting with members constantly. We have guys from every walks of life coming to contribute their expertise to all of these various fields and subjects that we've been talking about.
Come join the Discord. Come join the Discord. Join our community. Build up that better class of man. Now back to the episode. You talked a little bit about brevity codes, phase lines, call signs, different things regarding ComSec. Do you want to just kind of set the record straight there? So communication security, you even dip into mission control a little bit. What does that look like for somebody trying to say organize their community?
That's a that's a that's a rabbit hole.
That's a big rabbit hole. So let's just in my mind, when and we don't have to get too deep into it, but there's a lot of conflict regarding this, especially in the radio community, regarding encryption, ability to encrypt, and having good ComSec. So, what does good ComSec look like? I guess would be a little more focused answer.
That is also a rabbit hole. uh, good ComSec. The ideal ComSec for civilian run and gun team would be you want to have a digitally encrypted radio. Um, Digital encryption is going to offer exclusivity. So the only people who are going to be able to listen in on that radio traffic is anybody who has that encryption key. However, good ComSec rules also say that you should still use brevity code even on encrypted radio. The rule is always assume somebody is listening.
Right. That's what I was taught. Same thing.
Yeah. So ComSec, there's a lot to it. There's a lot of little tricks and things you can do to make yourself unobservable, I like to say. And that might
Okay.
not be the best term to use there, but you kind of want to, you kind of want to hide in plain sight. So one of those methods is we're kind of getting in the weeds a little bit. I'll just touch on this. We don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but using burst messaging. So a lot of the digital radios, pretty much most of them actually will have a text messaging feature. So I can type a text message and send it to your radio. And
Wow.
and versus keying up and speaking out that whole message, my radio is going to be keyed up the entire time that I'm talking. Versus if I type it out and just press send, it's going to be da-da-da-da-da, and it's done. So that's going to be less time on the air, and it's going to be a digital signal, and it's going to be less observable. And even if somebody does intercept that little burst of message, it's going to be encrypted, so you can't really break into it and see what it says.
How cool.
So there's some cool stuff happening out there when it comes to ComSec. When you get into digital radios is where you kind of learn all that stuff. But if you're going to stick on the entry level to radio, your Baofeng, good ComSec is going to be a lot of planning and testing. So you're going to want to get out there with a buddy, go test your area, test a variety of ranges on low power, test the same variety of ranges on medium power, then test the same variety of ranges again on high power, and see where your limitations are. Now do the same test all the way over again. Do one test on VHF, low, medium, and high power. Do one test on UHF, low, medium, and high power. Take notes. See what works better. See what doesn't work. See where your problems are, and then you can kind of make your band selection and your power output selection based off of that. But
Okay, that's more of the emission control
yeah, that's getting
side,
into
right?
emission control. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Another another ComSec aspect is you don't want to ever use actual names, locations, coordinates, grid squares, anything like that. You want to code all of that stuff, and that's where
Okay.
um, a little bit of pre-planning is going to come in. So you're going to need to get together and figure out a number matrix that kind of obscures your numbers if you're going to send coordinates and stuff like that. You're going to want to have code words. You're going to want to have call signs. You know, I don't want anybody hopping on the radio and saying, "Hey, Jake, can you hear me?" Um, my call sign with my training group, and this is just training, so I'll say this out there, but my call sign is steak fried. So they'll get on the radio and they'll be like, "Steak fried, can you hear me?" "Yeah, I hear you." So anybody listening in, any information that they can pick up that's real time information is going to be valuable to them. So any edge that the adversary can get on you, um, they're going to want every bit of it, even if it's just my first name, and they don't know my last name or they don't know anything else about me. That gives them something.
Helps to paint a picture.
It helps to paint a picture. That's right. So
Okay.
you
So
you want to
using your call
obscure.
signs. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, call signs obscure that information, and so does brevity code. Um, You don't want to say like, "Hey, I'm at the 7-Eleven on Main Street and Second." You want to say like, "I'm at Rally Point Delta." So
Okay.
anybody who's listening to that's going to be like, "Well, where the is Rally Point Delta?" Sorry for their language.
No, you're fine. You're fine. So like call signs, brevity codes, phase lines, uh, using like a code book or a code table.
Correct. Correct. And you can even go as intricate as using, this is pretty popular out there right now, using one-time pads. It's a way to uh, code something, and now you'll be spelling it out. You'll be spelling out a code, and then somebody will have to take that code and turn it back into the message. But it's a pretty foolproof way of encrypting your stuff over analog.
Yeah, how's that work?
You know, one-time pad is a cipher, and they call it one-time pad. It's like you're gonna have a whole stack of one-time pads with you, and once you use that one-time pad once, you throw it away.
Oh, so they're all different.
So they're all
That's neat.
different. Yeah. So Matt,
That's neat.
the you can get out there on Google and look up one-time pads, and there's a ton of information out there. You can make them yourself. It's going to be something though that each end of the radio, each user is going to have a copy of those one-time pads for it to work. You can't just do it on the fly.
Okay, so like you'd have to say like choose A10 or whatever destination you have,
Right.
and then you could use that table off. That's really neat. That's really cool.
And then I saw something today online. I thought this was really cool. So this guy made a paper version of the Enigma machine that the Germans used,
Oh my
and
gosh.
and it's another codex. Uh, it's another cipher. You know, if you know anything about the Enigma machine, the Germans had an edge in communicating during World War II because they had this machine, and they ran all their messages through it, and the Allied forces could hear this stuff, but they couldn't make sense of it, and they couldn't figure out how to break the code. Eventually, at some point in the war, there was multiple efforts on breaking this code. Um, the British there's a movie about it. I forget what it's called, um, but the British were able to crack pieces of the code enough to understand a little bit of the code at a time, and kind of get a puzzle piece here and a puzzle piece there, and kind of get a glimpse at what they were communicating. Eventually, the Americans did get their hands on an Enigma machine and were able to decrypt all the Germans' radio traffic and use that information against them. Um, and that's kind of where the one-time pad concept of as soon as you use this thing, you need to throw it away.
Right.
That's kind of where that comes from.
Okay.
But in today's day and age with technology, with AES 256 encryption, that's the gold standard. You can't crack it. Um, you might be able to get little bits and pieces of it, but it's going to take like mathematically, I think it takes like 10,000 years to crack an AES 256 encryption code.
Wow.
Versus a 16-bit code, you could crack it in like 2-3 days. Um,
Well, and like you said, if you're using good ComSig, regardless, if that is your personal SOP, your personal standard to have good ComSig, along with that encryption. So like you said, using your call signs, brevity codes, phase lines. Um, I even liked especially what you were saying about um, using the packet radio. Like the messaging or whatever else where it transmits for a very short amount of time, and use that with com windows. That's and good mission control. That would be very very difficult to use against you.
yeah, and all this hinges on the rule of always assume somebody's listening.
Right.
So if you just use a little bit of creativity and pretend like somebody's listening to you, and you can come up with a whole bunch of different code words and call signs and stuff like that within yourselves to you know obscure your communications and try to make it as exclusive as possible or as difficult to track as possible.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that just goes down to your own personal discipline and actually getting with and training with your guys. Like you said, getting together and coming up with these these SOPs, these standards, and talking things through so everybody's on the same page.
Yeah,
With that,
absolutely.
yeah. With that said, can you explain what a pace plane is and how someone could set one up?
Yes. So a PACE plan. PACE is an acronym for primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. And it's kind of born out of the military world of acronyms. They love their acronyms. Um, a way to uh, have a set of contingencies that are intended on keeping communication lines open. Um, so, what a PACE plan is not is uh, P, primary, channel 1, A, alternate, channel 2, C, contingency, channel 3, E, emergency, channel 4. You wanna mix it up. Uh, so it kind of in the bushcraft world of tactics, you want to have three different methods of starting a fire. So in communications, you want to have more than one way to communicate. Um,
Right.
so
So not just relying on your radio.
right, not just radio. So a good pace plan, you're going to have a radio pace, but you're also going to have a full communications pace plan. So kind of what we do, the group that we do training with now, we're more of a prepper group than anything else. But our primary mode of communication is telegram text. We all have Telegram on our phones. That's our
Okay.
primary.
Yeah.
And if cell phones go down, or if there's a power outage like the snow apocalypse of 2021, then
Goodness sakes.
we're going to get on our radios and hit a designated repeater. So that's our alternate. And then our contingency is going to be uh, something like we're going to have a comms window, but you need to get to this location and hit this comms window, and we're going to go simplex communications. So if the power's out, the repeater's not going to be working. If the repeater's not working, can't use that as a means of communication.
But you need to know the capability of your radios and your buddy's radios.
Absolutely. So we'll have like a high point in the city, like an 8-story parking garage or something like that that has good line of sight. Um, and that's where using comms window. Hey, if you can get to a high point and you can turn on your radio at this set time, then we can probably talk to each other in simplex. We don't need a repeater.
I love it.
And then that leaves emergency communication. So, you know, strap in a handwritten letter to a pigeon and send it in the air and hope it makes it.
Goodness sakes.
There you got to get creative with this stuff too. There's several means of communication. Your pace could be text message for your primary. Your alternate could be email. Your contingency could be a radio repeater, and your emergency could be landline phone. Mix it up a little bit, but it's going to be situation dependent, depending on your AO and the tools you have available.
Right.
So you got to kind of think through this stuff and hash it out with other people and put it on paper and go test it. And it takes a little bit of planning, preparation, and just good old fashioned, let's see what works and doesn't work.
Right. Go flash actually talking to people.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to touch a little bit more on the emergency radio frequencies, because something that I think that people really don't give enough credence to with with these entry level radios, with any radios really, is just the ridiculous amount of channels that you can program onto these things.
Right.
So something that I like to do in whatever area I'm at, I like to pre-program my radio with all the emergency frequencies for that area that I can think of.
Yeah, that's
so not.
that's
Sorry, go
good,
ahead.
man.
Yeah, not just the NOAA, but like all the dispatches, all of the if there's like a sheriff office, fire, firehouse, all these different all these different frequencies, so that if an event does occur, or just for my own situational awareness, I have a better, bigger picture of the of the situation that's going on.
Right. You got a variety of options in your arsenal to used for emergency communications.
Yeah, 100%. So, do you know of any resources for people where they can get that information, or uh, like how do you fill that out? Where do you
There,
find that stuff?
there is stuff available, and you could probably spend a long time searching Google and finding this stuff. But I actually made a slide, and I posted it on my Instagram back last fall, and it's called MCOM frequencies.
Oh,
And
okay.
the second slide in that post is emergency use frequencies. So
Oh,
um,
sweet. Okay, I'll
here
have to look at that then.
I'll read them out for you. It's FRS 20, it's MERS, it's the Marine radio. Marine is VHF radio. You can get Marine frequencies programmed onto your Baofeng radio. Um,
Okay.
the ham radio VHF simplex call frequency, the ham radio UHF simplex call frequency, um, and then I got on there the ham radio 220. Uh, don't worry about that one. Nobody's ever on 220. Hardly anybody is going to have a 220 radio anyway. But I put it on there just for reference.
Okay.
And then you got airband. Airband is its own type of radio. So if you can get your hands on an airband radio, you can get your hands on these frequencies. Then you got CB channel 9, and then you got your National Guard VHF frequency. Um, so I kind of took everything that's available out there and I just put it in one slide. So there it is, just for quick reference.
Cool. Well, I appreciate that for sure.
Absolutely.
That was handy.
And then if you're taking notes, add on to there. You're going to want to add all 7 NOAA channels, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association channels. Those are those are good resources to have.
So, how do you think someone can get the how much what am I trying to say? So, how can someone get the best out of their radio, regardless of what radio they have? Well, it's a really open-ended question, but we started off with this with this section of the community where people were, would either, buy blister pack radios or buy a Baofeng. They wouldn't even put the batteries in, or they, like you said earlier, they had all these radios and they were trying to use them, but like the radios were still talking to them in Chinese. So, what can people do to make the most of what they have now?
The best thing you can do is learn how to use it and learn how it works. Learn how to program it. Learn how to change the features on it. Right? So it's kind of like your pistol. You know, uh, how are you going to know how to defend yourself with a pistol if you never pick it up and take it to the range? If you never
Right.
disassemble it and clean it? If you
Right.
never
Yeah.
constantly reload the magazine? If you never look into what kind of ammo am I going to put in this thing? If you never figure out, can I see these sights in the dark? Do I need a flashlight on this thing? You got to get out there and use it, and you got to put it to the test. You got to know its limitations and its nuances, and you got to learn how to manipulate those nuances and make it work for you. Um, so learn how to program your radio. There's a bunch of resources out there, and there's a bunch of us radio guys on Instagram that are happy to help you as well. There's a plethora of YouTube channels that you can watch on how to do that. So learn what frequencies you're going to need. We just covered that. Learn how your radio works and how to program it. But then you got to get out there and test it. Just like you're going to take your gun to the range and practice with it, you got to practice with your radio too. Go grab a buddy, go drive around town, and go hike, and go use your radios, and practice switching channels, and practice comms windows, and practice emission control, practice using different bands. Find the limits of it. That's really the best thing that you can do, is really get familiar with it and get to know it like the back of your hand.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's why, that this in particular is hard for just the community at large, because it forces you, with firearms, with equipment, with, clothing, with just book knowledge. You can do all that on your own, right? But with radio communication, there comes a point to where you can no longer learn on your own. Just by the nature of radio communication, you have to be communicating with someone. So it forces people to break out of their comfort zone and be vulnerable and have to learn things from somebody. So I think that's a huge hiccup in the community at large. Just when people realize that oh, I can't just go on YouTube and learn everything, or I can't get an app and have it all be better. I have to actually practice with this, and I can't just practice on my own. I have to practice with somebody who can hear me mess up.
Right, absolutely. And here's a little trick for you. I do this with some of my digital radios. So I'll go out of my garage, set up my laptop, get the voice recorder set up, and hit record and stick a radio right next to my computer. And then I'll go around my neighborhood and test different bands on high, medium, and low power from different points in the neighborhood. And then I can come back to my house. That's an
interesting solution.
It's not the best, but it's something that you can do solo. And then I can replay that recording and figure out, oh, well, it worked from this point, but it didn't work from that spot in the neighborhood over there. And you can kind of, it gives you something you can do on your own. And really the best way to do it is you need a buddy. But
yeah, 100%.
It's a starting place if you want to start there.
That's really cool. That's a cool idea. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
And then my last question for you, man, was, do you have any basic foundational, I guess, key takeaways, any rules of thumb for people, regarding radio, for guys who are, just like at home trying to be more prepared for their families, or, for a natural disaster, or for the more militant, the more tactical side? Is there anything just like, broad stroke key takeaways?
Yeah, first and
people who are trying to
foremost,
get into radio.
Yeah, definitely. First and foremost, you got to be patient. This is not a skill that you're going to master overnight. So in the same regard, you got to be persistent as well. It is a skill that's worth mastering. But you got to be patient with it, and that's tough. Everybody wants that Burger King way of, I want it this way and I want it now. Well, you're not going to get that at a radio. You've really got to put in the time, do the homework, and do the testing, and do the repetitions and get familiar with it. From a preparedness standpoint, everybody out there has these little Baofeng radios. Throw some emergency frequencies on it. Keep one in your glove box. Keep one in your wife's glove box. Keep one in your junk drawer in your kitchen. Teach your wife how to use it. If you have kids old enough, teach them how to use it. Because you never know when it could come in handy. Just prepare. At $25 a pop, it's worth buying several of them and just stashing them around the house and the workplace and the garage and the truck and all that stuff.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, man. Do you have anything else that you want to add? Anything else you want to share? Not to put you on the spot.
No worries, man. Have fun with this stuff, Okay, here's one. I do have something. This is worth looking into. If you really want to take the deep dive and get into this stuff, go visit your local ham club. You're gonna learn more about ham radio, but radio is radio, and you'll get some of the fundamentals down out of these guys. So it's worth going, checking in with them, tell them who you are. Maybe don't tell them that you're interested in doing encrypted comms, because technically that's illegal. But tell them you're interested in learning about radio, and these guys will be eager to teach you.
Very cool. Well, thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate you having you on and sharing your knowledge on this. Hoping to reach our audience and to get more guys into this. And like I said, I really want this to be a ongoing series, an ongoing conversation to where we can raise the standard for everybody and make this more, a more mainstream hard skill that isn't as I guess isn't as novel as people have made it out to be. Something that's a lot more natural, in the community and in their families, just at large. So, thanks a lot for sharing your perspective and your knowledge, and we really hope to have you on soon.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you ever want to go deeper, let me know, man.
That'd be really great, man. So, uh, for everybody listening to this, could you shout out, your name, your channel, what you do again before we head off?
Absolutely. Find me on Instagram. My page is called Civil Sentinel. Uh, and we just started a podcast. We're on episode 5. We're breaking down
Congratulations, man.
comms. Yeah, thanks, man. We're having the comms discussion over podcast. We're doing it very casually and loosely. We're approaching it from an MCOM, TACCOM perspective. We're not doing it from the ham radio perspective. We're trying to be loose and goofy with it too. We like to have fun. So stop on by, give us a listen. You got any questions? Send me a direct message. I'll be happy to help any way I can.
Sweet, thank you so much, man. People need more humor. They need more. They need to get the human aspect back into learning, back into information.
Yeah, man.
So
You know,
thank you for all of it.
you got to take your training seriously, but don't take life so seriously.
Yeah, 100%, man. I love it. Well, if you're still here, thanks for listening. Thank you, Civil Sentinel, Jake, for coming on. You guys can find him on Instagram, like he said. A lot of great information here today. We are the Hard Time Strongman podcast, showing up a better class of man. Stay in the fight. Hey guys, this is 6 and 7 with the Hard Time Strongman podcast. Wanted to take a second to do a mental health check-in and to tell you all about the 988 Crisis Lifeline. So, the 988 Lifeline is a national network of local crisis centers that provides free and confidential emotional support to people in suicidal crisis or emotional distress 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in the United States. You can reach the Lifeline at 988lifeline.org, or you can call or text 988 to get help, to get someone real on the phone.
Every struggle is different. Every struggle is hard. But you are not alone in whatever you're going through. As someone who has used the 988 crisis line, I fully recommend that if you're feeling any of those feelings of depression, suicide, hopelessness, get in touch with them immediately. They will help you. They will listen to you.
Once again, guys, you can reach the Lifeline at 988lifeline.org, or you can call or text them at 988. As always, guys, stay in the fight.
Stay in the fight.